Well, as an anti-imperialist and as a person who believes that all people have a right to self-determination, I can't say that I'm in favor of Turkish military intervention in Syria. I think that's quite complicated. First of all, Syria is Arab, has an Arab culture. Turkey is a non-Arab nation. Turkey has a history of domination of the region from the Ottoman Empire. So there has been a lot of residual resentment of Turkey over the not so much today, but historically. It was the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. It was the collapse of Turkish rule in the region that has led to the establishment of the European settler state of Israel, that has created many of the autocratic Arab regimes and nations that we have today. Jordan was carved out of the Ottoman Empire by the British. Lebanon was created by the British and French. Kuwait, all of the Arab Emirates. All of these are family states. The Sabah clan in Kuwait, all of these states were set up by the Western imperialists in order to vouchsafe their access to the region's oil and natural resources. And that has been perpetuated up until this day, whether it's the Saudis, the Wahhabis in Riyadh, or whether it's the Sabah clan in Kuwait. We know that Kuwait historically was part of Iraq. It was carved away from Iraq with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and given to the Sabah clan. That's what led the former president, Saddam Hussein, the former president of Iraq, to think that he had an open hand to invade Kuwait because he had followed the West's dictates in terms of invading Iran and waging that horrific war against Iran when the Iranian Revolution first took power. The West thought that they could use Saddam Hussein to destroy the Iranian Revolution. And they supplied them with chemical weapons, they supplied them with arms, they supplied them with all the materials, intelligence, satellite logistics in order to defeat the Iranian Revolution, and he didn't. He failed. And he figured that, well, after I did all of this, we can get Kuwait back. And he made a mistake. He went into Kuwait, the Sabah clan begged the British and the Americans to help them, and we all know the rest is history. Okay, so it's not at all politique to advocate that one nation invade another, because the law says in the Quran that he raises up one nation against another so that he could check them, so that there will not be fitna, chaos on the earth. So Allah could raise up, for instance, Allah raised up the United States in order to check fascist Germany, in order to check the march of Nazism, in order to check German imperialism. And verily Allah is raising up people in order to check American imperialism, in order to check the United States. And so we cannot take the position that because we are militarily strong, because we are a factor in the region, there has to be considered that if some other nation is acting not according to our dictates or according to our values or according to our principles, then we have the right to invade them. Okay? But there is justification in Quran and Hadith to do just that. Because Allah says in the Quran, O ye who believe, let there arise from among you a band of people who will enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. And Allah says again in other parts of the Kitab that who will answer the call of the oppressed, who cry out, who will save us from this tyrant, who will save us from this, if it's not the Muslim? Who will answer the call? Now, so that's a dilemma. Yeah. But then again, Turkey is not projecting itself as a secular state. So to claim secularism in order to invade Syria would be somewhat hypocritical. Now, if it was the Republic of Iran that said they were going to intervene in Syria, well, it would be more appropriate because they are an Islamic state. They say that. That's what they are. The Sharia rules in Iran. So this is an Islamic state. So the call for them to help the oppressed applies directly to them. But how's it going to apply to Turkey? Huh? When you have a conflict between just the idea of civilian rule that even has a tinge of Islamist leanings. I mean, this current government is not an Islamist government. It's not a, it's not like that. It's not a secular government. Quite the opposite. We may have criticisms of the government and their policies. No one, I think, on this planet is satisfied with their government. I don't know anybody that I ever heard say they're satisfied with their government. And I've been to quite a few places where the government is supposed to be progressive. Cuba, people love the Cuban Revolution and whatever, but they got their beefs with, with the bureaucracy, how they deal with health, how they deal with this, everybody, that's normal. But to say that Syria that Turkey should intervene in Syria militarily, I think would be catastrophic for Turkey and for the Syrian people. I'm not an advocate of war. I think war is the most terrible thing that could beset mankind. I've seen the results of wars. I've seen how people suffer from wars. I see how, how there's nothing good that comes from war. But Allah says, could it be that you like something and it's not good for you, or could it be that you despise something and it is good for you? So we know that although we do not like to fight, although we do not prefer war, that sometimes it's necessary. You see, and that's why Allah says that once the enemy desists, you should desist. Okay, so we just shouldn't wage wars of submission, wars of conquest. We should wage war for justice, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Now, on that principle, we could say, well, Turkey should intervene. It's a neighbor. But that's the very distortion, that's the distorted principle that was used by the United Nations to overthrow the Gaddafi regime. That's the same justification that's being used by the United States now to intervene in Somalia, using Kenya as their proxy forces. That's the same justification the U.S. is using now all across Africa to invade countries, to wage clandestine struggles against countries, you understand, and saying they're defending them, they're helping them against their own, they're saving people's lives. That's not true. Okay? What I would think that Turkey should do, and I think they're more or less pursuing this policy now, is first of all, support the democratic forces in Syria as much as possible without outright invasion. Put pressure on the Assad regime to either step down or stop killing its people. I'm not an advocate of sanctions because I think sanctions is in fact an act of war. And if Turkey institutes sanctions on Syria, then they're actually declaring war on another Muslim country. But then again, the regime in Syria is not Islamic, it's a Ba'athist. So we have all these political complications, that tell me that it's kind of problematical to use military force, for Turks to use military force in Syria.
And how do you think the uprising in Syria will end?
Oh, wow. Allah knows best. Let me see. How will it end? I mean, there's a number of scenarios that's possible. One scenario is that someone in the regime will step forward and the security forces close to Assad would seize power and then take control and maybe over a period of the next 6 months or a year hold popular elections or begin to organize a more pluralistic state. Of course, that's pretty nice scenario. Yeah. The other scenario, which is not so nice, is that Assad will remain intransigent and continue to repress his people and murder the opposition, which will cause the uprising to take on the tones of armed struggle. armed struggle that against a conventional military with an awesome amount of firepower, which means it's going to be a very bloody affair. You know, and then Turkey will be forced, of course, into helping the rebels. You understand? Which means it could spill over into the border, which means there's certain forces in Syria, in the Ba'athist regime, that might find common cause with organizations like the PPK or the Kurds. You understand? And begin to carry out operations in Turkey. It gets kind of funky. It gets kind of complex. That's another scenario. Of course, there's an ideal scenario that Assad wakes up one day and says, hey man, this got to stop. I quit. You know, I'm sacking the military. I'm setting up a civilian military council for a transitional government, and I'm going into retirement. Of course, that would be wonderful. Yeah. You know, that would be wonderful, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. So there's a number of scenarios, any combination thereof. You know, it doesn't look promising. As long as this, because it seems like the more time goes on, the more recalcitrant, the more dogmatic the security forces become, the more harsher they become. It's like they have no shame. You know, I mean, they're shelling and killing innocent civilians on a massive scale every day. You know, and it's very hard for someone or some countries to sit by and watch this happen. You see, I mean, the United States claims that one of the reasons that it intervenes now in countries is because of the Rwandan genocide. But we all know that the Rwandan genocide was partially contrived by the French, supported by the West in certain ways. They turned their head because Africans weren't considered human beings. And they're still not. The death of almost 1 million Africans didn't weigh on America's conscience. That's not why they did it. America didn't care about it. It still doesn't care about dead Africans. I mean, they got 2.5 million people in prison. 55% of them are black. If they cared about black folks, those 55% wouldn't be in jail. And that's in America. So if they don't care about black folks in America, you know they don't care about black folks in Africa. You see? The hypocrisy of it stinks to the high heavens. You know, that intervention in another country to save civilian lives is a pretext, the new pretext of what I call New Age imperialism. You know, this is a New Age imperialist strategy. It's not the old imperialists, you know, that rule from afar and they sent their military to occupy the country and then create an elite to run it for them while they were occupying it and policing it and extracting resources. This is New Age imperialism. It's globalization. It's creating zones of influence and trade in which you only have to use military force sparingly. You know, that you have a regime or autocrat that's on the scene that takes care of all of your interests for you. And all you have to do is relate to him or her. And I think that that's the reason why the situation is so problematical. And as a footnote, you know, we talk about you know, the West has talked about that the greatest remedy for Islamic terrorism, so-called Islamic terrorism, is democracy. The Al-Qaeda, you understand, no longer has an appeal because of the Arab Spring. The Al-Qaeda really represented the frustrations of the Muslim masses, or the frustration to resist what Arabs considered Zionism, domination, and U.S. domination. So that Osama bin Laden, who we all know, if you talk to anybody, most Muslims in the streets, although Muslims do not advocate the killing of children, women and children, or indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians, most Muslims today on the ground don't see Osama bin Laden as a terrorist and as an enemy. They see Osama bin Laden as a hero, as a person who stood up against the most powerful empire on the planet and struck blows against it that changed their whole demeanor. Okay, so this is not to say that that the strategy or the tactics of Al-Qaeda, you understand, is something that Muslims should endorse. It is to say that there is this deep-seated feeling of frustration on the part of the Ummah in the inability of their leaders to resist domination, to resist control and imperialism, and to bring true freedom to their own people. You see, it's very important to understand that the reason why Al-Qaeda existed was because, first of all, every violation of the Hadith and Quran that could possibly be thought of, the Saudis have committed it. They've allowed Kafirs, Kuf, to occupy Arab land. There's soldiers, American soldiers, in Saudi Arabia. Huh? They operate from, they kill Muslims from their bases in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. They send their drones, control their drones in Pakistan and in Afghanistan to kill Muslims. And other Muslims are hosting these murderers of Muslims. Okay? That right there, to me, means that every leader that does that should be killed. He should be wiped out. Because he is permitting non-believers to kill believers. For whatever reason. Because we know for most of those drone attacks, they don't just kill the target of the drone attacks. We've had drone attacks in Pakistan that was carried out against entire communities while they were in the midst of prayer. Because there was a family there that was supposed to be part of Al-Qaeda or part of the Taliban leadership, and they were in the masjid on Jummah praying, and they attacked the masjid. Not only did they kill the Taliban leaders, they killed everybody that was there praying. And we're supposed to say that's okay? As Muslims? We're supposed to say, we're supposed to only hold the Americans accountable for doing that? The Americans wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for other Muslims. You know, they wouldn't have been able to do it. They operated from Kuwait. Okay, Kuwait is not Saudi Arabia. It's not the Hijaz. It's not the holy place. Okay, so cool. We can deal with that regime by itself. But when you have the keeper of the holy places, which is in Saudi Arabia, when you have the keeper of the holy places permitting foreign troops to station themselves there and carry out military operations against other Muslim nations, that regime to me, they're not mushriks, they're munafiqun. They're hypocrites. And they do not deserve to be the keeper of the holy places. That's how I feel about the Saudis. Okay? Which means I probably can't make Hajj. But, without getting arrested. Or make Hajj with another name, right? Yeah. Make it with another name. Allah, verily Allah knows your name. You know, but I'm saying that, yeah, I don't think that we should make excuses for Muslim regimes that permit the imperialists to kill other Muslims.